This episode contains discussions surrounding mental health. If at any point during the episode you or someone you know is in need of support, call 988 or visit iasp.info for help. Welcome back to another episode of the Make Mental podcast. My name is Caleb Munsky, and today we have on another great guest. I really enjoy sitting down with former athletes, individuals, business owners, mental health professionals, you name it, who have gotten to the point in their journey where they can share their story. Right. I think that is a huge step when someone can figure out what they're going through or what they have already gone through. Right. Because there is a difference. Some of us have already experienced something and figured it out. And others of us know that we're figuring it out right now, kind of like myself. But we have on Zoe Hightower. Thank you so much for joining us today, Zoe.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to share my story. And just like you, I am also still figuring it out.
Yeah, and that's the beauty in it, right? We have some stuff figured out, but other stuff we are just not really sitting around waiting for the answer, but we know that we're experiencing it right now. And like I said, we're at a point where we can share it. And usually I go through like a long list of accomplishments for our guests. But anyone who knows Zoe or has read some of her stories, she does not solely identify with only her athletic self. She is also very religious. She's still a student. So I'm not going to go through a long list of all of her athletic accomplishments, although there is quite a few. So if she wants to just sneakishly drop some in this video, we're not going to stop her. But I know it's not the main focus of her life and her identity at this point. So I will not pigeonhole her to her accolades. So Zoe, if you want to start off the conversation, I'll kind of tag along and I'm excited to hear more of your story.
Okay, awesome. So, hi everyone. Like you said, I'm Zoe Hightower. I am currently a graduating senior in my last semester at Florida A&M here in Tallahassee. I have ran track for about half of my life now, so the past about 11 years, and I recently stopped running collegiate track this August going into my senior year. Like Caleb was sharing you, my identity has never solely been in my sport. I've been very versatile, so I'm also involved in a sorority on campus. I love creativity and visual storytelling, so I have a freelance, I guess, digital portfolio on the side, and I also write for my university's publication. So track was never something that I put all my eggs in a basket in, but I was always passionate about it. I loved running. I loved seeing, I guess, just the aftermath of what discipline and repetition looks like. But recently, after my last season, it was in God's will to redirect me and pull me away from the sport. So that's kind of where I am now, and I can share a little bit about when we keep talking about how my track career ended, how we got here. But right now, I'm just taking things day by day. Every day honestly looks and feels so different. It's been a journey. It hasn't been seamless, but I'm thankful to be where I am and in a place where I can share, encourage, and not just myself, but others.
Yeah, I'm curious because you mentioned repetition and hard work and consistency in your sport, and then almost immediately you followed it up with every day looks so different.
Okay.
What is that new feeling? What is that like for you now that something you've had for half your life is no longer part of who you are?
I think the best word or way to describe it, it's an adjustment. Some days it feels liberating, but other days it's nice to have a routine. I want to say the biggest struggle is, no one's on me to come to practice. No one's on me to take care of my body anymore. No one's on me to get up, get motivated. So I would say that's the hardest adjustment, being my own, I guess, push. Um, Sometimes it's exciting to, like, hey, I don't have to go to practice today. I can just go hang out with my friends, or I can go study instead of doing this. But other times I'm like, I'm bored. What should I do? Or this would be a cool time to socialize with my teammates. So going back to every day looks different. it just feels different every day. Sometimes I miss the routine, I miss the structure, and other times I'm thankful to have more leisure time to do things and tap into sides of myself that maybe track didn't allow me to beforehand.
Yeah, do you create a structure for yourself now? I know a lot of athletes need that structure, or we feel like we do. So do you have a specific routine you get up and you do every morning to get yourself ready for the day?
Um, More or less. My first semester not running, no. I would just wake up. I wouldn't say I would go with the wind because I still have class, so that's some type of structure. Like I mentioned before, I was in a sorority, so I was doing things with that gave me some like to do list for the day. But after like life kind of slowed down, school settled in, and I'm like, I can actually do whatever I want. I kind of had to make a routine, find a way to, okay, how am I going to be active and move my body today? How much time do I want to allocate to my studies? How much time do I want to allocate to my new passions that I now can actually feed into? And then also making sure I make time for myself and social aspects. So I would say as time got along, I kind of found a new routine that works for me. And like I keep saying, it looks different every day, but there's definitely more
Hmm.
structure. The first semester, I was like, I don't care. I'm doing whatever I want. So
A little bit of freedom there.
yeah, it was weird, but I was having fun.
I think it's important for our listeners to know, did you choose to end your track career, or was it kind of something that you were forced out of, for lack of better terms?
Definitely did not choose
Okay.
to end
Okay.
my track career. It was I don't want to use the word force. I really want to use redirected. At first, it felt like it was taken away from me. But I believe that nothing that God has for you can take away, and I that's really what's been like keeping me sane. Like if this was for me, it can't be taken away from me. I guess it's a time where I can share kind of how I got to where I am. My last season, just a little backstory. I'm very versatile. I ran 5 events since I ever started running track. So I was always in relays. I did long jump and triple jump at one point, and I was like just a sprinter, so anywhere from the 1 to the 4. In my last semester, my event changed, so I went from being a short sprinter to a long sprinter. And unfortunately, last spring, around this time last year, I lost a really close friend to me growing up, and that was my first real death in my life that I had to encounter on top of being in school, being an athlete, and then I was also just struggling with friendships and relational issues. So it was a lot of emotional imbalance on top of the pressure of competing. And if you had a chance to read my story, I just didn't mesh well with my last coach. He's a great trainer, but his coaching style and my adaptability just didn't connect. And sometimes I believe that happens a lot in collegiate sports, and it's a business side of it. So if that connection is not there, sometimes the coach has to let you go. And that's kind of where I was at and what happened to me. I dealt with a lot of frustration. I thought it was unfair. I was angry. Um, but I would say at the end of the day, it's God redirected me for that, for my mental health, for my mental stability. And so I can now share and encourage others who may be going through the same thing or struggling in their place of athletics right now.
I think as athletes too, we can compartmentalize a lot within our sport. Every once in a while, say you do bad on a test or a homework or something, it transfers over into practice. But I'd argue that on game day, it's almost nothing else matters. Like I had some friends on the bus who could do their homework and then go play a game and play well, and I'm like, how the heck can you do that? Like I don't even want to watch a video. I just want to sleep and then go play the game. But I think it's interesting when external factors enter into athletics and we can no longer compartmentalize. And then just from getting a sense of talking to you and reading your story, I think that might be a little bit of what happened, right? Your whole life, you've been able to be towards the top of whatever event you've done. And I have a respect for sprinters because when I did track way back in the day, I was long distance, could never sprint for my life. I think I got kicked out of the long jump because it wasn't very long. So I have major respect for that. But do you think that is part of your story, is just everything happening at once? Your mind and body just kind of went, okay, we need a hard reset.
Definitely. I believe if you don't take care of yourself, it'll eventually catch up to you. And I feel like sometimes with being a sport, you really have to separate personal life and athletic life. And I feel like what was happening was I was, like you were saying, compartmentalizing everything and trying to balance it all. I wasn't acknowledging what I was going through. All I knew is, okay, I have this going on in real life and I have practice at 3. So by the time 3 comes, that can't matter. And this is what my focus is: get through the drills, get through practice, get through warm up. And there's a lot of pressure in my environment, my practice environment. So I really didn't have time to let my personal life overflow into my training. But that catches up to you very quickly. If, like I was saying, you can only do as well as you upkeep yourself, especially your mental capacity. And the longer you put that off or over prioritize things outside of that, what you put in comes out emotionally. And it's true with sports, it's just all going to pour over and it's going to show up. So my demeanor, you can see on my face, I don't want to be at practice. I'm trying to get in and get out. And I think that was very evident to my coach at the time. And because I didn't know how to best handle my emotions or handle my grief, all people were seeing was like, you're just trying to get done the quickest way. And then it showed up in my practices, which overflowed into my races and my competition. So definitely.
Go Global is a free-flowing technology company that handcrafts, embellishes, and manufactures garments and accessories. Designed on the principles of people, places, and possibilities, Go Global reimagines fashion and is inspired by you, the people of the world. Yeah, I think some of those days are okay, right? Like you're allowed to have a bad day, you're allowed to have a bad practice, a bad race. But then enters the business side of athletics, like you mentioned, especially at a Division I university. I never experienced that. I was at a Division III university, so no scholarships. Of course, we wanted to compete and win, but if you didn't show up, chances are you weren't kicked off the team. You just didn't get play time. But I think that is important to note the business side of athletics, right? If it becomes a repetitive, I'll use bad habit or unfortunate just series of events that leads you to show up again and again at less than your 7,500%. It's got to be difficult for a coach to see that transition, and it's definitely difficult to experience as an athlete. The more and more I talk to different athletes, what, and excuse me if I'm overstepping here, but what was that moment like for you when your coach was just like, "Look, I'm sorry, this is not working anymore." You might did he or she did they come right out and just say you're done, or was it just like a, hey, you need to regroup and we can revisit?
I think my biggest difficulty was I didn't really get that moment until it was like you're off of the team. So I was very transparent with my coach about what was going on. And I guess to give further context, because I also want to remain honest as well. Looking back on it, I felt like I was giving my best. I made my workout times. I was doing well in practice, but it didn't always translate to how I was competing. I think that was the biggest struggle for my coach to see, like, you're doing well in practice, but you're not competing well. And it comes to a point where a coach, it like we're talking about, it's a business. You keep your spot if you perform well. He keeps his job if he's producing. And I think the struggle is, how are you practicing well, but it's not translating in your performance. And I would say we had 1 to 2 meetings. One when I was transparent about what I was going through and the death I was experiencing, and that wasn't met with much sympathy, which was kind of a shock to my system. Um, and I felt like there was a lack of just understanding that we go through things as young adults and athletes outside of track. So by the time it came around to revoking my membership on the team, it was after, which I did not, I don't know if I shared this fully in my story. I appealed my scholarship because my scholarship was reduced at a greater amount than what he had let me and my family know. And it was after appealing my scholarship that I was taken off of the team. Um, so at the time, it felt like retaliation. Everyone is entitled to their own opinion and what they believe happened. But in my eyes, that is what I believe happened. And it was a shock to my system. I don't know if I completely answered your question, but I didn't see this coming. So I I just wasn't prepared for this change,
Yeah, first
which
off,
was
we are
difficult.
sad and sorry to hear about the loss you dealt with, and I'm sure are still dealing with on some days. Um,
Thank
and
you.
and from the sounds of it, it seems like showing up was your 100% at that moment in time, and for some reason, one reason or another, it just wasn't understood by all parties involved, and that's always a difficult situation because, and again, 20, 21, 22, we're at such a different maturity level than even 24, 25, right? A lot of us, I'm in the, I guess, not even accepted, but like the widely practiced college age range is what, 18 to 23. I mean, there are exceptions to the rule. You, the moment you get out of college, you already have that life experience. You've chances are you've dealt with greater number of losses in your life, but again, that first one, um, and then your performance declines somewhere where you're used to excelling. Your relationships, your friendships, everything becomes affected, and sometimes showing up is all you can do. So I don't want to take that away from you, and I want to commend you for showing up because as a as a student, a former student athlete myself, I know that sometimes just and in our case, putting on those cleats and walking out to practice and trying to block out everything is a taller task than it may seem. Um,
Thank you.
I want to take time to acknowledge that. But fast forward a little bit, we'll jump away from existing in a very difficult moment in your life for too long. Um, it it's almost been what, 6, 7 months since you haven't been a technical part of the track team. How much learning and growth
Yeah.
came, and how quickly was that for you? Obviously, you're still learning and growing now, but I mean, I'm sure you weren't. You smiled a lot today. You seem very bubbly from the outside appearance. How did you get back to this version of Zoe?
That's a great question. So I learned, and I would say I feel like I learned and I grew a little bit each week. And how did I get my smile back? How did I get my peace back? One, I would say community is everything. Life is meant to be spent in community and relationship with others. So really having friends and family be able to give more of me in a season where I was able to give less of myself was really important for me to get through this difficult time. Even my teammates checking in on me, making sure like, hey, like how are you adjusting to your new normal? I never want to take away from how much other people have really gotten me through this difficult season. Learning, how much learning did I do? I just learned that I can endure hard things, and that's something that I didn't always feel like I could do in track because yeah, I got through this hard workout, but it's because I have to, not because I wanted to or I was really able to. It was like this is what you have to do. So I learned that I can do hard things, and I really learned to never underestimate the impact of sharing your story. Whenever I shared my story, I was met with so much love and support, and I was thankful that just opening my mouth was able to inspire and uplift and encourage other people who are going through similar things or who have dealt with other things. And how I got back to myself, comparison really does kill. And I really had to understand that I cannot compare where I am now to where I was 6, 7 months ago. That is a habit I really had to be intentional about breaking, not and being present. I will say it's okay to miss your old life. It's okay to mourn like what you used to have. I feel like even outside of stepping away from sports, when you get older, like I'm in a season where I'm about to graduate college and I will look back and like, dang, I miss college. I miss the freedom. But really embracing the season that you are in now is a great way to redeem your joy, redeem your happiness, and really, if not, get yourself back, walk into a new version that you were trying to become and showing up for this next chapter of your life. So I would just say community, ending comparison, and just being present. has helped me.
Yeah, I love that. That's wonderful. I think you're right. I think comparison is the thief of joy. And I don't necessarily disagree with you when I say it takes reflection to understand that. I mean, you can go through your entire college career comparing yourself to the best team in the league or the best player on your team or the person in front of you or your last performance or coach's perception. Like there's so many external factors that you can compare yourself to, but I think when real growth happens in an individual, it's when they shake the side eye from within. It's the internal comparison of um, like yourself to yourself. And I think for anyone who's going through that or has gone through that, understand exactly what I'm talking about. It's like when you, I don't know, it's really difficult to put into words, but the best I can do it is for myself, it's like, okay, well, I know I'm capable of doing something, but I didn't do it today. And then I start comparing, like, okay, well, I did it yesterday. Why can't I do it today? And then it goes down this horrible, horrible um, cycle.
It's like going
I
down
want.
his hill
Oh
spiral.
yeah, I want to go back to your point of comparison being the thief of joy. Did you? And you mentioned sharing your story was difficult. I can relate there as well. A little bit of imposter syndrome sort of thing. It's like other people have worse stories than me to share, and I use worse lightly. Different stories, to me, seemingly more difficult stories. Right? I mean, mine. Now that I talk about it so much, it doesn't necessarily get easier, but the weight it used to hold over me gets less. And I'm
Right.
curious if that's the case for you. Does talking about it more give you more freedom, or are there times where it really sends you down that spiral of comparison and imposter syndrome?
Um, I would say I'm at a point today where what do I think I want to say? Talking about it does give me more freedom because I feel like I'm in a position where I'm be able to release how I felt. I'm in a different position now, so I don't feel the same way about the situation as I once did initially, obviously. But when I shared my story in December, I was very hesitant because, like you were saying, it does feel like, well, dang, some people underwent way more trauma in athletics or they experienced something harder than me. I even know personal teammates who are still experiencing these things. So it's kind of like you almost have to recognize that just because someone else shares trauma doesn't invalidate your personal experience. And I was definitely nervous because I'm sharing a story with my teammates who still are in that environment. So they can easily say, well, that didn't happen or this didn't happen. But the truth is, no one is there and enduring what you experience. So your story is how it impacted you and how it affected you. So it's going to look different from the outside looking in, and just understanding that um, your story is not in vain. It's not invalid just because someone else may have gone through it or someone else might not understand to the full extent of how it impacted you, because you can carry things well, but it can still hurt you and impact you deeply without you showing others. And that's what I was nervous about. Like, my teammates didn't always see me. I cried every day for a month straight in the month of February last year, and my teammates would never know that. They just saw me come to practice. And there's times where I thought about, like, they won't know that I had people praying for me every day. I'm trying to make it through the week, trying to compete. They don't know these things. So just making sure that you understand that your experience is unique to you, and it's okay to realize, like, hey, someone else endured trauma, but that doesn't take away from what I experienced and what I've grown and what I believe God has brought me out of, and now I can share, which is now a form of release and something that I am more than thankful to just impact others and encourage myself with today.
Yeah, and when you shared your story, there was an outpouring of support, and I'm not going to say like a replica of your story, but there was a lot of people who are like, "Hey, thank you for sharing that. I thought I was alone." I mean, hundreds and hundreds of responses on Hope for Athletes Instagram page alone. What was that feeling like? Because after being afraid, taking that leap of faith, like you mentioned, just feeling all those emotions for an entire month, and then almost a year later deciding to share your story. What was that weight off your shoulders like?
Um, I would say it was confirmation of just like benefits from being obedient. I definitely prayed a lot before sharing my story and even uploading it. By the time I was uploading it, I was excited and nervous at the same time. I was more excited than nervous, but I felt confirmation that like God was proud of me for using my voice. I just felt supported in that moment. And it was good to know that it was good and both sad to know that so many people shared that experience with me. Because you don't want anyone to endure pain or be upset or difficulty in any realm, especially within sports, which is supposed to be a form of release using your gifts and talents. And it should be fun, or else you wouldn't have wanted to continue playing sports. Um, so that was a disheartening part to know that so many people go through this, but it's also encouraging. Like, dang, I'm not alone in this season. Like, I'm seen, and my story made other people feel seen in their current or previous situation.
Empire Specialty Printing is a family owned and operated screen printing and promotional products company. ESP has been in business for over a decade by providing consistent and high quality service. Products include custom hoodies, shirts, hats, business supplies, and much, much more. Whether it's for a family party, school team, group, or corporate apparel, Empire Specialty Printing has what you need to get the ball rolling.
Yeah, I think that is another good point. You got so many good points. I just keep following up with good point after good point, but it's true. I appreciate your openness and honesty for this conversation, and I think it is true that you don't want anyone to experience the sadness, the disappointment, the confusion, the anger. I mean, you name the emotion. It comes with a traumatic event, no matter how traumatic it may seem to the outside world to that individual. But that sense of community that you go back to, um, even if you don't know the person, just to know that you're not alone, they're not alone, is very powerful in the healing process. Because if you are in such a dark spot where you're like, man, I'm alone, like my family's praying, I'm talking to God, I'm trying to be patient, nothing's happening. Well, there's 10 other people in my situation, and God has a lot of prayers to respond to. So just be patient, take your time, keep believing, and it goes a long way. And you're evidence of that, right? Like you said, it's not complete, and I don't think it ever will be, right? I think that's also part of the healing process, is understanding that it may never, you might not get the closure you want, but the chapter will end, so then you could start a new one. I always like that analogy, right? When you're reading a book, sometimes the chapter ends and you're just like, well, dang, it's not how I want it to end. Like, what happens next? And then you flip the chapter, and there is remnants of that last chapter, but the book goes in a completely different direction than you could have ever imagined. And I think that's what happens a lot with college athletics, because there's a finite number of, if you're in a scholarship position, finite number of scholarships, finite number of games, finite number of champions. Like, everyone can't win. So understanding loss at the capacity that you have at such a young age, I think is going to serve you wonderfully in life. Because honestly, I don't even think, actually, I shouldn't say that. A lot of people go through loss like this, but not at the age that you have. Um, do you have any thoughts on that, of like, and this might be totally off the deep end, but like, have you ever thanked God for letting you experience this at such a young age? Because I think when you can take such a dark moment in your life and turn it into a moment of appreciation and grace, it can do wonders for yourself.
Um, I would say it definitely. Well, thank you so much for just encouraging me and speaking life into me. But I would say initially, no. 9 times out of 10, if I'm going through something difficult, I am like asking God to take me out of it. And what I have found
That's
is
fair. That's fair.
like I'm not thankful at. I don't want to say I'm not thankful at all, but that's definitely not the first emotion I feel. Um, but being a believer, I'm thankful always to have an understanding that even when things are hard, I'm being refined, and in a sense, some people might call it character development or like just being growth, but I know I'm being refined. Um, and on the other side, if not now, I know and I trust that I will be thankful for whatever is a product of what I'm going through. What I believe, I am thankful that I'm thankful now that it has happened because I'm able to be in a space where I can really do so many things that I could not do when I was playing a sport. Like, I can really be involved in my academics, I can be involved in my university publication, and I can honestly take leadership positions now because I have more capacity to take things on. So, I think shifting my perspective from frustration to thankfulness and gratitude, that's a part of the healing journey. Like, you might not be thankful on day 1, you might be content on day 10, and by day 30 you're like, this isn't that bad, and by day 45 I'm thankful to be where I am today. So it's definitely a process. I think what I found to be true is, if you're not trying to, you can't really rush healing, you can't rush moving on, you can't rush being content. You really just have to embrace every emotion as it comes and learn how to channel it and show up as your best self, which looks different every day. But something that gives me hope is, in order for something to be born, something has to die so you can make space for it. And that's very figuratively speaking. But that's something that encourages me. Like, whatever is next to come and what I'm in now, it could not have happened if I was still being used in the same capacity within athletics. So I am now thankful, but it took me a while to get to a season of gratefulness and gratitude. I'm really quick to adapt to things, but I'm really slow to accept things. So it's a constant battle of the two.
I like that. Really quick to adapt to things, but really difficult to kind of accept that those things have happened. And again, I don't know if it's just like it's not just athletes who experience that, but since that's where most of our life is spent, I feel like I've seen that a lot in my friends and in athletics in general. But what I want to point out again is there is no timetable, like you said. You can't say from a place of experience, you can say, oh, well, it took me whatever 10, 30, 45 days to adjust, where it might take, if someone else went through a similar experience, it might take them a year, it might take them a day. Like, every single person is different, again, to your point, but the things we experience are similar. And I think that's what makes the healing journey so powerful, is you could experience a very similar situation to Zoe and already have figured it out, or could be 10 steps in the healing journey behind her, right? And your healing journey could look different. You could get yourself back on the team. That could be your healing process. You don't necessarily have to explore other versions of yourself yet. Like, that could be next chapter, as we mentioned. And I think that's what's so beautiful. I was going to say fun, but beautiful to watch. Fun is not the right choice, because obviously these are not always fun emotions, but as an outsider,
Right.
hearing your story and watching your growth, and honestly just learning about it a few weeks ago, it's been incredible to see not only your story but other people that I've talked to, like, just the transformation they've gone through within themselves, right? And some of them the transformation has been for worse for the time being, but they know and they believe that they're going to get out of it, and I'm excited for them to take that journey and get themselves out of it. But I think, again, to kind of not go off on a side tangent here, it's important to know that because your story looks similar to someone else doesn't mean you are going to have the same exact outcome as them. It's going to happen in its own time. You're going to experience your own emotions. While they might be similar, that's the community aspect. It's good to know that, oh, if for some reason I do have this emotion, I can go look at Zoe's story and use it as a guide. How did she get through it? What does she turn to? Oh, what multimedia production does she have? Can I take a look at that to help me get through it? Like, there are so many avenues that you can take to help yourself, as long as you understand that you're not going to be a carbon copy of someone else's story. Did you,
Right.
besides your religion and your community, did you turn to someone else's story by any chance to get yourself through? Or was it something that you just had your community and you rolled with them?
So I will say, I had. It's so great that you said that, that your story will not look the same, and that is very true for my situation because I had a lot of teammates who are also not a lot, but a decent amount of teammates who also were not on the team. And I have a close friend. Her name is Iana, and her situation completely different than mine, but the outcome was the same. She no longer is on the team. So she encouraged me to share my story. She's not in my immediate community, but she's my friend. She's on campus. She's my teammate. And that's a relationship that has grown because we were able to uplift each other in a season where we didn't feel the most confident, where we didn't feel the most seen. So her story really encouraged me to use my voice and share mine. And then also just speaking with some of my other teammates who had to walk away from the sport and seeing, like you're saying, everyone deals with things so differently. How have they transformed? How have they picked themselves up? Ooh, excuse me. And just found their new normal.
Yeah, I like that. I didn't think of it in that sense. I was thinking more of like someone experiences before me. Can I rely on their strength? But that's a really cool perspective of, oh, someone close to me is going through a similar scenario. Let's draw on their strength. Let's get through it together.
Right.
Let's help each other through it, or let's encourage each other. So then like kind of a back and forth. I've never looked at it from that perspective, although I probably should have with the amount of conversations I've had. So thank you for opening that to my new notebook of things that I can talk about. But that has to be an interesting feeling as well, right? Knowing that you're going through it together for different reasons.
Right.
Do you think that, I think you might have hinted at it, but I kind of want to touch on it again. Do you think that sharing your story helped your friend, or do you think that your friend encouraging you to share your story helped you more, or was it kind of like I mentioned, a give and take relationship?
It was I guess it was like give and take mutual. I think we definitely both impacted each other. She kind of triggered me like, oh my gosh, I want to share my story. I don't want to like, oh my gosh, I want to share my story, but I was like, I can share my story. I have the freedom. And I'll either be met with support or I knew I wouldn't be met with all this hate. I might be met with a few rude comments and stuff, but it definitely gave me the confidence to use my voice. And then after sharing my story, we had a conversation and she was like, that impacted me as well, because you have to think about it. I see this young lady, I train with her, I've competed against her. So she saw this firsthand. So it was kind of, I don't want to put words in her mouth, but to say more or less emotional for her to see me be in a position to share what she physically saw me go through. And I can't say I physically saw her go through everything because some things I didn't know until she shared her story. But it was just definitely encouraging to see both of us using our gifts and our voices in other realms, knowing that we are not identified by a time, a number, a practice, and that we can just uplift ourselves and one another in similar but very different situations.
Need a tow? Top Shot Transport is the place to go. From cars to machinery, heavy equipment to general freight, Top Shot Transport will give you the best rate. Top Shot Transport is fully licensed and ready to tow your stuff anywhere. Email topshottransport1@gmail.com for more information.
Yeah, again, I like that point too. You're not defined by your achievements, although that's what most people see. Like all of our social medias, well, not all of ours, most of our social medias are like a highlight reel for your life.
Right.
And I know that's such an overly used term, but it's true. No one has again, I shouldn't say no one because the narrative is kind of changing. A lot less people post their failures than they do their successes, right? And I commend people that post their failures because I'm still not there yet. But and I don't know if I ever will be. We'll have to see in the next chapter. But I think that's a good point too. Is like if the outside world is only seeing you for the times you hit, for the grades you get, for the job you choose, whatever the external validation is, you name it, that's not solely who you are. It could be a piece of who you are, right? Like, I mean, I have my jerseys and stuff hanging behind me on the wall. Like that's definitely a piece of me, but I had to realize in my own journey that that's not all that I was, right? I was not how many minutes I played on a given game. Did I get onto this postseason team? Did I become a captain? Like that was a really difficult dynamic to balance in myself. How did you balance that within yourself? Because I had the luxury and I guess I should say privilege to play for 5 years, even though COVID was the reason I had that privilege. um, I got to see that shift within myself before I left, so that I had kind of a cushion, right? I was able to say, okay, you have 6 months left. I had a time. I had a time period. I was like, okay, within the next 6 months, you have to adjust your mindset to be okay with not having these tangible things that you can define yourself as. When
Right.
that's stripped away from you, that's got to be so much more difficult. How are you? I'm not gonna say did you, because you're still going through it. How are you handling that emotion of I'm used to getting up, hitting a certain time, going to bed. What do I do now?
Um, I would say with sports, something I've always told is numbers don't lie. So in the midst of running track, you already have outside pressure. There's outside pressures, and then you already have pressures on yourself because, like, if I don't run this time, I'm not traveling. If I don't travel, what did I just practice for all week? And track is one of those sports where you work all fall and it shows up in the spring. So it's kind of difficult whenever you're like, dang, I ran all summer long. I ran all postseason long. Why isn't it translating to my race? So initially, whenever that pressure, and I ran the 4 my last season, so the anxiety when you're on the track to go around the track one full time always high because it hurts. No matter if you run slow or you run fast, it hurts equally as bad. So not having that pressure on me for the first time, thankful, because I used to get so anxious before I ran the quarter. Um, Now going back to it, it's so funny you ask because I have recently started like running again, just to keep myself healthy, and I'm eating a lot, so I'm trying to cut down a few pounds. And the easiest way I know how to do that is to run. And I was doing a workout, and I was actually surprised at myself. Like I wasn't tired. I was able to do a lot of things. I was able to run the same amount as I used to be able to, but it was the times I was hitting. So I caught myself last Tuesday like that was too slow, and then I had to tell myself like you don't run track anymore. Like you can run a little bit slower. There's no consequences except for you comparing yourself that you're not at track speed anymore. But you're not a track athlete anymore. You don't train how you used to, so that is normal. So I feel like now it's like kind of funny because I use it as like a competitor, like a competitive way to be push myself when I'm training. But it's more liberating not having like being anxious all week. I will be anxious about a race I have on Saturday by Tuesday when I was running, just because I already knew it was gonna hurt. So I'm glad to not have that feeling anymore. Um, if that answers your question.
Yeah, totally. And I think it's an interesting point as well to know that like you enjoyed track, like you love track, otherwise you wouldn't do it for half your life. But
Right.
it also brought you this like unparalleled source of stress.
Yeah.
That has to be extremely confusing. And you could be sitting here thinking, hey, that's me. Okay, if it is, I encourage you to figure it out. But every athlete, before the whistle blows, before the what in track they shoot the gun into the air, before the gun goes off, like there is a level of anxiety that I argue is normal to experience,
Yeah.
right? Like that's healthy. But obviously, when it becomes significant enough to the point where you're like, oh my God, I'm so thankful it's no longer there. That's when the toxicity of the student athlete in the sport, there's some gray area, right?
Right.
How do you how do you hope that athletes can figure that out? Obviously, this was a unique experience to you, but do you have any advice for athletes of like, oh my God, I'm experiencing so much stress. What do I do to relieve it if I want to keep playing? Or what do I do to relieve it if I want to step away from my sport?
I think the biggest thing that has helped me is knowing the difference between fear and nervousness. Like you mentioned, it's okay. It's very normal, especially if you run track. You should be a little bit nervous, or your heart is going to be racing before you get in your box and prepare. That's healthy, and it's all about letting your nerves work with you and never against you. But when it turns into like fear based or uncontrollable stress, you kind of have to, I want to just say, just take a step back and realize what's contributing to your fear and your stress. If it's your coach or your environment that's implementing the stress on you, maybe check, is this the healthiest environment? Why am I so scared to race at something that I prepared all year for? Or is it the actual event? Because for me, it was a combination of both. Even if I had the most happy-go-lucky coach, and in my story, I shared how I had come off of having a very successful season before adjusting to this new coaching environment. I ran the 4 then to, I would say I definitely wasn't just as nervous because my coach was more uplifting at the time, but I was still nervous getting in the box. And I realized, okay, this race is just painful and I have to learn how to execute my race so I'm not focusing on how much it's going to hurt or how tired I'm going to be. But when it became a fear, I really had to just pay attention to that and realize, like, why am I scared? Because they're really, my coach, one of my previous coaches, Coach Butler, always said there's no pressure when you're prepared. So if I'm prepared, I'm getting in the blocks. It's okay to be anxious or it's okay to be nervous, but when it turns to high level anxiety and fear, I would encourage athletes to really just be cognizant of that and evaluate, like, is this the right environment that's producing a side of me where I feel like I have to be fearful or in survival mode all the time? Because at the end of the day, your sport should bring some sort of enjoyment. It should be fun. Collegiate sports is a business. It's a job that most people, you probably wouldn't understand until you're in that position, and it's a grateful position to be in. It's an opportunity that shouldn't be taken lightly. But just I want to encourage athletes to really just be in sync with their mental health and notice, like, when things are nervous or it's out of a place of fear, because you don't want to do anything when you're scared or fearful of what might happen.
Yeah, adrenaline versus anxiety, I think,
Right.
is a perfect way to put that. And they both can coexist, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when one is so much more relevant or prevalent than the other, that's again when you have to take a step back, and not necessarily take a step back in the sense of like, hey, I'm done. Take a step back, right? Give yourself that grace period of a week and be intentional when you go to practice and you feel that anxiety or that adrenaline. Just stop for a second and say, okay, why am I experiencing it? Is it because the event is about to begin? Is it because the game is about to start? Or is it because if I do poorly, I'm going to be back on the bench or I'm not going to be traveling? That's the difference to me personally. That's how I look at it, right? Where is that coming from? Um, and I appreciate you for pointing that out. Once an athlete figures out where it's coming from, say you've had the experience and you can figure it out, it's almost like, what's next? It's like, okay, I figured it out. If I let go of my sport, there goes who I've been for most college athletes for the majority of my life. If I keep my sport, I could still be having all this anxiety and stress.
Mm-hmm.
I chose therapy. Is that something you've ever explored? And if it is, positives, negatives, all things therapy, because we're huge proponents of that over here. I'm curious of your experience, if at all, with that.
Yes, I also chose therapy. I was in therapy. I went once a week during that time, and I'm still in therapy now. It's been very helpful. I think just having a professional help you navigate your emotions and with no bias, but always gives you accountability was very helpful for me, because sometimes what I found is you can't always lean in on your feelings. You can't always act off of your feelings. So sometimes I needed someone to help me navigate these emotions. Like, it's okay to feel how you're feeling, but let's be proactive about it. Let's acknowledge how you feel and let's set yourself up for the best emotional success so that can pour into your best athletic success and your active academic success or career success, whatever it looks like. If you can take care of yourself, it'll always translate into how you take care of the things you value, you're passionate about, and that you work towards.
Yeah, and I think it's important that you said someone who's there without any bias.
Right.
We all have friends, we all have family who would do anything to help us, but they're going through shit too.
Yep.
Point blank. Excuse my language, but they are. It's not that your therapist isn't. It's that they're professionally trained, or your counselor, whoever you see, your psychiatrist, they're professionally trained. It's their job,
Right.
right? And I know that sounds scary. I know it sounds like, oh my goodness, like they get paid to listen to my problems. Well, quite frankly, they do. So utilize it, right? Especially if you're on a college campus, chances are it's extremely inexpensive or even free if you're fortunate enough. Don't let that go to waste, right? You pay for the dining hall to feed your body and take care of your physical health. There 99.9% of colleges, I would argue, has free mental health services. Why not feed your brain? And as soon as I understood that, because therapy was scary for me, I was like, oh my goodness, I have this resource available to me. So that I can get better, so that I can learn, so that I can understand, so I can grow, so I can help others eventually. And I still go to therapy as well, although I've turned it down to maybe once a month, because I'm practicing the things that I've been taught. I think that's important too. Is sometimes therapy is necessary for life, but other times it's a crutch. You don't keep a cast on forever. That physical mental reference. Once you're ready to start walking again, it is going to be painful. You are going to fall down. You do still have to go to physical therapy, just not as often as if like you used to. I think that's a perfect way to practice if you're like, okay, I've been going to therapy for a while, or maybe not. Maybe you chose a different avenue to help yourself that wasn't therapy. There's a lot out there. Um, can you start to exist on your own and be comfortable with yourself and still have that crutch there? Because that is important, right? If you cut it out completely, it might be for you. You don't know until you try. But I personally appreciate the approach of, okay, let's dial back the amount of times I go to therapy. And if you want to relate that to a physical sense, it's like, I mean, I think everyone likes soda, but I've come to find out everyone doesn't. This is a crazy one, so hang with me.
Okay.
If you have 100 sodas in a week, that's unhealthy. 100 therapy sessions in a week, in my opinion, is unhealthy. Like, you have something larger going on that you still need to figure out, so don't ignore it. But if you can learn to exist with 1 or 2 sodas a week, 1 or 2 therapy sessions a month, a week, whatever that looks like for you, then your life is going to be 10 times more happy. I will say, I won't use success as the metric. I will say your happiness will increase.
Right.
College can be a roller coaster, but Xant's got your back. First session, absolutely free. After that, just $25. Easy on the pocket, heavy on support. Stress, burnout, addiction, or trauma. Xant's expert coaches are here for you. Download the app, kick stress to the curb, and own your college journey. Your mental health, your way. Xant. Download and thrive today.
And we are getting closer to the end of this episode of the Make Mental podcast. I know time flies, but is there anything that you wanna talk about before we get into the last segment here? Anything you want me to know, the listeners to know, that you just need to get off your chest?
I feel like I've been an open book and transparent. Your questions have really helped navigate the conversation, but I just want to say it is so true. I think you made a great point about giving yourself space to practice what you take away from therapy. I was the same. I went once a week, then I went bi-weekly, and now I go once a month, because you don't want to become so codependent on someone else, because therapy, I think, for a lot of people can be very scary. And then once you get comfortable, you kind of see the benefits of it, right? But you never want to become too codependent on someone else telling you how you should or should not live your life. And that's not what therapy is at all. It's used to navigate and assist you. I think of therapy almost kind of like teaching you, but like just emotional boundaries. Like, you don't need to see a professor every day of the week. And after a semester, you're not in the class anymore. And that's very true for therapy. You learn to apply what you've learned in the sessions, and you create a healthier lifestyle for you, which will eventually impact those around you just by nature. So, yeah.
Yeah, beautifully put, beautifully put. And I think that will take us into the final segment here of this episode. I like to ask a few questions to our guests kind of at the end. Sometimes it's 2, sometimes it's 3, depends how the conversation's going, how I'm feeling. But we'll start with the typical one that I always ask. is there one person right now that you can shout out by first name if you're comfortable, that you're just like, you need a hug, I'm sending it to you. So if they ever get to listen to this episode, they can feel the warmth of your love.
I will always send a hug to my mom. I feel like
Ah,
my mom, sometimes she'll call me and I'll be like in the middle of my day and she will not always she doesn't always understand how much I love and I'm thankful for her. But my mom speaks so much life into me. She holds me accountable and she is rooting for me in every realm of my life. So I will always give my mom a hug in every lifetime. She deserves nothing short of the world.
oh, I'm so glad I didn't say, but not your family, because sometimes I say that. But no, that is beautiful. I think again, another good point that you brought up. A lot of times we are busy, and if a parent calls or a caretaker calls, it's not that you don't want to talk to them. You're just like, I don't have the mental capacity right now. I'm busy. My day's been crazy, or my day's going good. Like I want to hang out with my friends, not talk to you, mom. Like there's that sense too, and that's normal. But it is always nice to appreciate and send love to those who love us back. So fantastic answer for that question. I wasn't worried, but for the record, I knew you were going to kill a question. Second question is, if you could only wear one color, just one color for the rest of your life, what would that color be?
Black. Black
Oh,
everything.
why? Why?
I don't know, like less is more sometimes. Black is simple. It matches with everything. I don't know. It's like classy. Oh, I don't know if classy and chic are different, but black is just, I have all black on right now. It's just.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Someone else said black, and they said it's because in order to make black, you need a little bit of every color. And I thought that was a pretty unique way to look at it.
That is interesting.
They said they're a little bit of everything, but at the same time, they don't want people to necessarily know that. So
that is funny.
Black is the most popular right now.
It goes with everything.
There we go. And then the final question here, just a quick shout out to the Jay Shetty podcast, stealing his question. If you could make one rule for the entire world to follow, what would it be? It's a lot of power.
That's hard. Don't spend more than 24 hours being upset. I think, 48 hours. Acknowledge your emotions. Don't downplay them. Validate yourself. But if it's something that can be easily worked through or you can share forgiveness, release it. I found so much power in just releasing things, not holding on to anger. And you can just use so much more energy to feel positive emotions. But if it's something that requires you to be upset for a week, I don't want to downplay it. But try to just spend more time and energy on things that aren't going your way or make you upset, and realize that everything is working for you and not happening to you.
Yeah. Understand where your anger stems from.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. That's a cool rule. Well, that will just about do it for this episode of the Make Mental podcast. Thank you for sharing your story, for being a beam of light for me on a very dark, snowy winter day in upstate New York.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. It's this time of year, right? I've learned to enjoy it and embrace it and just know I'm going to have gray skies for a couple weeks in the middle, but I can go make a snowman if I want to. So there's that. But thank you again, Zoe, for sharing your story, for letting us know that we are not necessarily our achievements, that even if we have something in our life for so long that gets taken away from us, that we're multifaceted human beings. There's so much more to us than just our sport, and there's power in the journey, and we see that through you. So thank you so much one last time for joining the Make Mental podcast, Zoe.
Thank you for having me, Kayla. It was awesome giving me and so many other people the platform to share their stories. And you're so welcome from Florida. It's cold, but it is not snowing. So thank you.
Cold. What is it, like 50?
I don't want to say because you're going to laugh at my cold, but around
Oh my goodness. I'd be in shorts.
Thank you.